How would you go about describing torture to a friend? One useful definition comes from the Convention Against Torture in 1984. It's described as any act that intentionally causes severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, for such purposes as obtaining from them or a third person information or a confession. Professor Fritz Alhoff has a similar definition: the intentional use of force against non-combatants or their property to intentionally instill fear in the hopes of realizing some ideological aim. So, both teach us that torture must be intentional, can be physical, mental, or emotional, and is usually done for information or for symbolic reasons. Alhoff is an important scholar in defining and discussing torture. In his famous ticking time bomb scenario, a deadly explosive is in a major city. The bomb ticks closer every second, and intelligence officers have someone in custody who may know where it's planted. Alhoff believed that in this specific scenario, torture is justifiable. The torture debate tends to split people down two passionate sides. Pro-torture arguments include: is it more morally corrupt to commit an act of torture, or to let innocent people die because you didn't try every method possible to get information? Further, to argue that torture is immoral overlooks the fact that one person has a different concept of morality to the next. We shouldn't judge torture based on emotions, but on whether it can get results. Anti-torture arguments include: people will admit to things they didn't do to avoid being tortured. It is easy to frame someone by pushing them to their limit. Secondly, practices like waterboarding, where you drown a person, resuscitate them, and drown them again, destroy part of the interrogator's humanity. Finally, what starts as a rare exception to the no-torture rule will probably end up being abused, as more interrogators try to claim the ticking time bomb excuse. Torture became a household talking point in 2004, when leaked photos from the US-run war prison Abu Ghraib caused a huge PR disaster for the Bush administration. Under the 1984 Geneva Convention, there's no justification for the troops' actions. It states that torture can never be legitimized, even in times of war, internal political instability, or any other public emergency. 1 year later, Time magazine published a report on the treatment of America's war prisoners. It claimed that according to a paper by the Senate Intelligence Committee, the CIA had been exaggerating the effectiveness of their harsh interrogation methods. Time described one case where a captive was forced to urinate in his pants because he was denied a bathroom break. Professor Adam Henschke tackles the use of torture in his journal article, taking terrorism, ticking time bombs, and torture seriously. Henschke writes that the debate surrounding torture is complex. It is not easy to decide whether a group of innocent people's right to life is more important than a prisoner's right not to be tortured. Ultimately, Henschke believes that in very specific cases, torture is acceptable. The key is for academics to clarify exactly when it can be used. Only with a clear conceptual framework can we ever allow powerful governments the option to torture. But Henschke makes the following concessions. Firstly, people will admit to things they didn't do to stop being tortured. They might even offer false information, which only endangers the public further. Secondly, it's impossible to know for sure whether the captive really knows where the bomb is. Thus, interrogators could be using inhumane practices for no reason. And finally, the perfect ticking time bomb scenario would only occur in the real world rarely, if at all. Western films and TV shows often portray torture as a regrettable but necessary practice to save lives. One famous example is 24, a long-running drama that frequently used ticking time bomb scenarios. The main character, hardened CIA operative Jack Bauer, will stop at nothing to defend his country. Karen Tenenbaum Weinblatt's journal article, Where is Jack Bauer When You Need Him?, suggests that TV shows like 24 fit with the US government's broader efforts to legitimize their illegal use of torture. She also criticizes 24's creators for taking advantage of terrorism fears. The show premiered just 2 months after 9/11. For Weinblatt, Bauer became more than a character and was even referenced in the political realm. A Republican candidate for the 2008 federal election, Tom Tancredo, said this: "You say that nuclear devices have gone off in the United States, more are planned, and we're wondering whether waterboarding would be a bad thing to do? I'm looking for Jack Bauer at that time." Weinblatt also studied how the US media used 24 politically, and found that conservative columnists typically used the show to legitimize torture. This highlights how deeply 24 is embedded in American political culture, and also shows how effective media framing can be in making a gruesome concept like torture seem palatable. My media text is a short video from Amnesty International's website, as part of its Stop Torture campaign last year. In a blurb, Amnesty describes torture as a global crisis, a stance that is starkly different from Horowitz's, that is, the belief that torture can be justified. Amnesty goes on to explain that since torture happens away from the public's eye, it's also out of the public's mind, an obscure form of injustice.
Nothing has changed. The body is a reservoir of pain. It has to eat and breathe the air and sleep. It has thin skin, and the blood is just beneath it. It has a good supply of teeth and fingernails. Its bones can be broken. Its joints can be stretched. In tortures, all of this is considered.
Part of why the clip resonates with viewers is because of the medium itself. According to Forbes magazine, videos are one of the most effective forms of advertising because they offer deeper layers of meaning than words on a page, like body language. Indeed, the video plays powerfully on our senses. A mangled, bloodied hunk of clay, resembling a naked man, hunches over a chair in a submissive position. Dark lighting and disjointed close-up and mid-range camera shots flash from one to the next, making the viewer feel a growing sense of unease. The sinister voiceover reminds us of the human body's vulnerabilities: fingernails, teeth, and a thin layer of skin. When the video ends and we see a man's gasping face, the viewer connects with him emotively. We now understand that torture has a human face. The mise-en-scène is sparse, evoking our imagination. It's a dark setting with only a chair and a lamp. It could be happening anywhere and for any reason. The ethnicity of the captive is also ambiguous. The purpose of stripping back these identifiers is to show that torture happens all over, to people of many races, religions, and creeds. Amnesty's video works to counter the pro-torture media texts that Weinblatt discussed. Unlike 24, which focuses on Jack Bauer's heroism, this video focuses on the emotional distress of the captive, honing in on his fear. For Amnesty, torture is simply a pervasive problem that seems to be ignored.